Hello everyone, I'm Sanjay Upal and I'm the Senior Vice President and GM for our Service Provider and Edge business unit at VMware. It gives me great pleasure to have this Edge track at VMworld and to go through what our strategy is as well as what's happening out there in the industry at the Edge. So let's start off by looking at what's going on from an industry disruption standpoint. Across a number of verticals, and here we've picked just three, when you look at healthcare, when you look at manufacturing, and when you look at retail, this industry is going through rapid change. And just some interesting examples. You look at retail. One of the examples that we have of our customers is when cars show up at the gas station, then the gas station owner can recognize which car it is, can recognize when that car had come before, and can throw up some sort of offer to the person who's come in that vehicle. So across the board, whichever vertical we look at, there's a sea of change that is happening. And this change is happening where data is being produced and consumed. So next, what is going on from an enterprise perspective as these architectures are becoming distributed? Typically, we're used to seeing a very orderly stack. We're used to seeing endpoints in one place, and we're used to seeing them go through a mid-mile plane, and then they go to the back-end cloud, and everything seems really nice and orderly. Well, that order is gone out the window. Everything has become highly distributed right now. Now, we've tried to make that into a simple picture over here, but essentially what is happening is where data is produced and consumed is completely distributed. Where that data is being served is completely distributed. The people who are consuming this data are completely distributed, and the endpoints as well are completely distributed. Now, in this entirely distributed world, how does one bring some amount of structure and chaos from a software perspective so that you help both the service providers as well as the enterprises meet their goals? Now you see over here at the bottom of the slide, it says data center and the near edge and the far edge. We're going to go through what this architecture really means in this highly distributed world. So what's happened in the last several decades is data centers used to be on a per business unit basis. That has become highly centralized because data center consolidation happened in the 80s and also somewhat in the 90s. So that ended up being a small number of data centers per enterprise. But then the public cloud came in, so a lot of the applications migrated and are still migrating to the public cloud. But the adage that we should remember is distribute when you must, centralize when you can. And that adage has actually served us pretty well in the 2000s, and that gave rise to all these centralized cloud-based applications. But when the source of the data and the consumption of the data is getting so distributed, you cannot simply rely on these centralized models to continue. So there's a diminishing benefits to using the cloud when it comes to this level of distribution. Now, the reality then that we face is that there's all these examples, there's all these use cases, whether it's autonomous vehicles, whether it's omni-channel retail, whether it is these connected oil and gas platforms. Across the board, there is this examples of distribution. And what's going on right now is that VMware, along with other companies, of course, are out there trying to figure out what is the pattern of all these use cases that is going on. And there are some common elements that we're finding. And these common elements is what we're showing at the bottom. There's certainly what's going on with the carriers with 5G. There's what's going on with 5G from a private perspective. These are all underlay technologies that are coming in. And then at the overlay layer, which I'm about to show you, is what's going on with secure access services, which can run on a programmable infrastructure. And then there are the edge applications that you put on top. But how does all this work together? What is it that makes this thing become one consistent software stack that both enterprises can use, and then service providers can layer their services on top of the connectivity layer to serve the needs of these enterprises? Which brings us to what is the edge? The edge is really the place that's the digital infrastructure that serves the need of workloads that are run at a number of locations where data is being produced and consumed. And that's it. That's what the edge is. Now, when you look at that definition of the edge, it really comes up with that there's a variety of edges out there. But we can simplify this from a layered architecture standpoint by saying that there are essentially three layers to this stack along with the management plane. The layer at the bottom is really the edge infrastructure layer on top of which underlay edge services run. By underlay, we mean the actual network. So this is the radio area network, this is the 5G, this is the fiber, and the software that goes on it that needs to run in order to provide that connectivity. The layer on top of that are the overlay services. These are services both from a networking service standpoint as well as a security standpoint that come together so that they can use the programmable network underneath to provide the services that the edge services need from an application standpoint, which is the layer on top. The layer on top serves the need of these applications. So whether that application is a healthcare app, or whether it's a connected car app, or whether it's an app that is doing retail, all of these need application services so that the apps can run in this distributed fashion. Now, to bring it all together, there must be a management plane that provides not just the telemetry, but that provides the configuration, the installation, the operations, and the maintenance of this entire system. So this is really what our vision from a VMware Edge standpoint is. Now, one very important point here is that we're not about locking people into a particular architecture or even a particular vision, because this is about choice. We want to give choice for this edge to run on different types of cloud-based technologies, in fact, even different stacks, and also for this edge to provide the conduit to different hyperscalers at the back end. And therefore, we call this the MultiCloud Edge. And VMware, we believe that we are in the lead here to provide enterprises with choice for the MultiCloud Edge through the service provider. Because as I pointed out, the service provider is absolutely critical in the delivery of this edge as we move along. Now, when you look at the deployments and the use cases for this edge, this is where things will come together. So there are 6 different use cases and deployments that span both the near edge and the far edge. Now, in very simple terms, when you take that definition of the edge and you look at just the location aspect of it, then you can say that the near edge is everything that is in between the backend data center and what's running on the customer's prem. This is a simple definition of what that near edge is. And the far edge is actually what's running on that customer's prem. So you take a look at what's going on in the near edge. Clearly, across both the radio area network and the telco core, there is a massive change that is happening. In the RAN itself, there's a disaggregation going on, the likes of which that we have not seen in decades. I can't remember a time when we've seen this level of disaggregation, when almost $1 trillion is going to be spent between now and the next half decade for that disaggregation. This disaggregation is going to fuel innovation. It's going to help both the enterprises as well as service providers. Next is what's happening in the core. The core usually used to be deployed in terms of a monolithic infrastructure from as long as I can remember, in terms of the hardware, the middleware services, and the applications on top. Well, that too is going through a transformation. And then there's a set of points of presence. And the reason why we call these out, because the next set of edge services are going to be provided from these points of presence. But these points of presence are software stack that can support networking services and security services at the near edge. Now let's move across the communication service provider to the far edge. These far edge locations are on the customer's prem itself. Now, they span things from a SASE layer, starting off, of course, with the core service, which is SD-WAN, and then you add other services on top. So what you need is a small piece of infrastructure, whether it is a device or whether it is actually your endpoint, because we at VMware have a robust business, of course, in endpoint computing as well. So we take a look at that, and then we add these services at the far edge, on the customer's prem itself, that gathers the information and some level provides a set of aggregation before it goes on into the near edge and then perhaps to the back end as well. And then we have 2 projects that are going on, depending on now at that same location, what's the size and what's the use of these far edges in terms of the applications that they run. So there's a project Yoda and there's a project Grogu. Yoda project is, the case for Yoda is, slightly bigger, beefier edges than what you would find in the lowest level SD-WAN type of edge. But there are some certain important applications to be run, using containers, even using virtual machines, and how they're virtualized on this kind of infrastructure. You can think of this as very large retail stores, distribution centers, manufacturing floors will use this kind of infrastructure. And then we have a project Grogu, which is an extremely thinned out edge. This is a very lightweight edge that would be running on a simplified stack. In this case, kind of, a Velo OS that we're calling, K3S running on top of it, with a small number of containers that you would want for those edge applications. Now, these are the use cases that we're seeing. Again, this is a multi-cloud edge. And now what we're going to do is we're going to look at specific examples, and we're going to bring people on here. Really exciting to find end customers, both from an enterprise standpoint, as you'll see, as well as from a service provider standpoint, that are going to substantiate this picture. And I'm going to bring on Andre de Villiers on board, and he's going to come in and talk about what Michelin has been doing. I'm very pleased to present here. We have Andre de Villiers from Michelin, and we are going to have a conversation about what's going on with SD-WAN, SASE, and the edge. So welcome, Andre, and thank you very much for taking part in our VM World Show.
Thank you very much, Sanjay.
What are the current challenges that you're facing right now at Michelin?
At the beginning, 3 years ago, the digital manufacturing transformation was really focusing on things that are inside the factory. So they were trying to find the value of things that are taking place inside the factory, basically using more data and analytics. And now we are starting to see the usage of cloud services, again, to do analytics, but we are also starting to use machine learning and artificial intelligence. For the time being, we see the traffic increasing, but we are still able to handle it. So, and of course, thanks again to the SD-WAN, it's very easy to reroute or to change the priority of our applications. And so we are able to manage it. But we see the traffic increasing and increasing. And we know for sure that we are heading to a goal.
Yeah, got it. And I think, especially as we've seen with AI and ML workloads and all both the human traffic as well as traffic that is generated by IoT devices can be voluminous. And that increases the cost, of course, of going to the cloud, which we have been looking at now, as well as other people have, in terms of what can you do at the edge itself, so that you can then reduce the traffic that goes back to the cloud. So sort of an expansion of what VMware is looking at, and we're calling this just simply the MultiCloud Edge. So thank you very much, Andre, for this. Now, we're going to take a slightly different turn now. We're going to bring on Rajesh Jothi, and Rajesh is going to talk to us about what AT&T is doing. Hey, Rajesh, it's so great to welcome you again. What is AT&T's vision and your vision for the enterprise and the service provider edge?
Everything's happening at the edge. We see 5G and edge as sort of the playgrounds of innovation when it comes to thinking about the next gen use cases and how we're going to go about it. I think from a vision and a strategy perspective, the way we are thinking about is sort of, the customer edge, the network edge, and the cloud ecosystem, right? And definitions are different, but the way we are approaching it is that ultimately it boils down to sort of, having the ability to deliver a software-centric network that is secure, that connects at the speeds and the latency requirements of the applications to deliver a very differentiated experience. Is that experience a business outcome? Is it about a user? It's about a machine. It's about whatever the application needs are and how we see the modernization, driving that. So when I go a little bit deeper into that, right, we've again talked about more and more applications coming closer to the customer edge. We are seeing industrial IoT use cases that come about. There's conversations about, private MEC with 5G, with edge compute, residing within large campuses, whether it's a university or a manufacturing plant, day in and day out, right? We then go to the network edge, right? The network edge is where we're delivering wireless and wireline connectivity, high speed, highly resilient, closest to where the public cloud environments are, and bringing all of those together. And then we think about the customer edge, which is, again, with SD-WAN, with SASE, and many of these use cases that we've talked about, is seamless end-to-end integrated solution that touches upon the customer edge, the network edge, and the cloud ecosystem, bringing it all of that together. And, a very interesting data point that I've seen again and again, which is ultimately technology and the innovation is there, but it gets fueled up, it gets more use, it gets more use case validation as we see adoption, as we see the business outcomes that we deliver for our customers.
Fantastic, Rupesh. I always learn something new when I'm chatting with you. Thank you so much for being here with us at VMworld.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Next, what we're going to do is move into a really innovative service provider. This service provider in the Nordics, and the Nordics, of course, are known for their innovation. But Telia in particular, has this track of innovation that they've been working on. And I'm going to be delighted to welcome Rainer onto the stage.
Thanks for having this conversation. Really great to be here.
And then how do you see the requirements for CSPs evolving? Because the enterprise architectures are becoming a lot more distributed, with applications moving to the edge, with overlay services and 5G and the edge coming together.
So this is the exciting part, that we are really crafting the future and we are really getting new customer experiences, but also operational efficiencies in place. So number one, we share, I think, the vision of openness. We share the vision of really driving the innovation in an open ecosystem and what I call in kind of a fit for purpose cloud environment as well. So we will see that all our operations, and I'm running the entire operations of the company here across the IT, across the products, across the networks and so on, everything will be softwareized, especially also the network operations. So having a cloud infrastructure that supports this kind of softwareization is key. And therefore, we will get the benefits of running a modern software company around CI/CD, around the agility, around the resilience, zero downtime. So it's just giving us that benefit that we see from other software areas into the network. So that's number one. Number two, obviously, I mean, we're going to be on the forefront of providing that kind of infrastructure, secure infrastructure, to make use of the innovation that is coming in. So we want to be like forward compatible with all the new workloads that are coming in. And for example, the 5G core as a key workload that we are running is obviously geared towards running in a containerized environment. And number three, I think clearly, and I said that before, we are providing by means of doing that not only operation efficiency, but also customer experiences that are quite outstanding. And I just want to mention maybe two things. One is the kind of the enterprise mobile networks that we see, where we run dedicated kind of networks which are secure, which are reliable, which are low latency, which are really fit for purpose for the respective customer as a basis for further workloads, is one of them. And we have about 10 commercially live EMNs today, and we are seeing a huge demand for such kind of platforms, right? And the second one is obviously on the 5G, on the broadband, we are seeing a lot of things like the slicing coming in, where we can dedicate certain elements of the network. I call it network as a service to our customers, which are really bringing in completely new use cases, whether it's the transportation, the autonomous driving, whether it's in health and so on. So great to be on this journey with you. And I'm really passionate, especially having this partnership with you personally and the leadership of VMware. We'll have a great future. Thank you.
Well, that was excellent to hear from Rainer. And now let's take a step back and see across all these 6 deployments and use cases, what is that common stack that we've been talking about? What is this universal edge that VMware is building that is going to serve the needs of the enterprises with the path going through the service provider? And this is where all of this really comes together. So when we look at this, as I described before, there is an edge infrastructure layer. That infrastructure layer is at the hardware layer. And now our software stack, which of course, historically, everybody's software stack was built a lot more for what's going on in the back end, in the cloud locations, in these very large scale data centers. But the needs of what is happening at the edge are different. It is not the same need. There's a need for low latency. There's a need for small form factor compute. There's a need for distribution and connecting things together. So as you can see from the lowest layer here, our software stack spans everything from a small ARM device all the way to the biggest data centers that you can find. And it's the same consistent software stack, whether you're running your edge applications with containers, whether you're running your edge applications with VMs, or some combination thereof. So that's the lowest level stack. On top of this are the underlay edge services. These are the services that are important from a communication standpoint. These are those edge services that service providers use to build their networks. And just to give you a couple of examples of these, we have our infrastructure that is running underneath. So this would be, of course, NSX. We have this new version of ESX that runs real time at the edge. And we have, open source Kubernetes, both the lightweight version as well as the full featured version from our TKG. And running on these are these underlay edge services. So these services that the 5G network needs to run. So both at the centralized unit as well as the distributed unit, you have these edge services that are running. So this completes what's going on in the underlay, the edge infrastructure, the underlay on top, because you need the network in order to have a robust edge, a resilient edge that you can deploy. On top of this are the overlay edge services. And we know these, we started off here, of course, on the SD-WAN journey. And now this has gotten expanded into cloud web security, a network intelligence layer that we are calling ENI, and then of course, secure access for all those locations where you're not actually sitting in a branch office. This is the next generation of legacy VPN, because VPNs, really required you to terminate back at the enterprise for the most part. They were not zero trust aware. They really didn't know how to segment based on applications. So secure access comes in. And then this traffic, as it comes in, either from the branch or from individual locations then goes through a security layer, whether that's cloud web security, of course there's CASB, and then we're adding on firewall as a service as well. So you can think of these overlay edge services as an extensible set of services that are provided on top of the underlay to serve the needs of the applications. And VMware is not going to be the only provider of these overlay edge services. The really exciting thing is we're welcoming other folks as well. In fact, there's an example now that we have of stack services from hyperscalers that are running on the same infrastructure below, but tied together with the VMware overlay edge services. And the layer on top then is the compute services that would be provided for the applications themselves to run. And this is critical because the apps are today, ISVs are building these apps on a vertical standpoint. We have applications for retail, we have applications for manufacturing, we have applications for healthcare, and these require a layer of compute services that are provided for the application to run. Now, all of this comes together because there's a management stack that spans across what's going on at the underlay, and we have our products, as an example, our telco cloud automation product, and then we have our overlay products as well, an orchestrator that pulls together the overlay edge services, and then we have the compute layer management products, like as an example, TMC, that brings together what's going on at that compute layer. This consistency in the management plane is extremely important because as enterprises have told us, as service providers know, that enterprises really want to run their core business. So this is the VMware Edge. In a more broken out part, it still has multi-cloud because you run on different cloud-based technologies, and it provides a conduit if you need to the backend, cloud systems from a hyperscaler standpoint. So when you look at this now, when you bring it all together from what's the benefit that the VMware Edge provides to both enterprises and service providers. Starting off from the service provider, the service providers, of course, are trying to modernize the underlay. They want to make sure that they're not stuck with these monolithic, slowly moving, slow feature velocity infrastructures. And so modernization of the underlay is what one of their focuses is. And they're spending tens of billions of dollars. They have to be able to recover that in terms of monetization of the services on top. And so the benefits that they get from VMware at the edge is the modernization of the underlay and the monetization of the services on top. And from an enterprise standpoint, of course, what enterprises are looking for is to accelerate this edge journey, is to be able to build, run, and manage their edge applications in an agile fashion, in a flexible fashion, so that they can compete with their digital transformation journey. And while they're doing that, they want to leverage their existing infrastructures. This is not about chucking everything out the window. This is about leveraging what you have, growing it from there, and then being able to consume the services in an easy fashion. And starting off with consuming SASE services easily, and then consuming the services on top as well. So these are the benefits that tie it all together. So hopefully by now we've been able to show how VMware is coming together, bringing the stack together at the edge, what that edge actually means, what are the disaggregated portion of the edge, but how it comes together in the management plane, how there's a commonality of architecture across all of those 6 deployment use cases. And we've heard from Andre, from an end user Michelin standpoint, we've heard from AT&T across these, 3 of the deployment use cases that they have. And we've heard from Rainer at Telia of how they're going on this really exciting journey of innovating and transforming their telco core to serve the needs of their customers. So I'm really excited about this Edge track at VMworld and about these exciting speakers that we have. Please make sure that you attend the other parts of the Edge track and everywhere else, everything from what's going on at the endpoint back into what's happening at the data center. This is a really exciting VMworld for everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity.